My name's Andrew Brooks. I'm a photographer and a digital artist, and every image in the exhibition is made up of lots and lots of separate pictures. I've been invited over to be part of a festival from Manchester in northern England, which is where I live and work. So Manchester's the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, so there's a lot of old industry, there's a lot of old buildings, and this is where I've got my studio in one of the old mills, and I spend hours sat at that desk slowly working on these big images in Photoshop, and some of them might take me days to do, some of them might take me weeks. So there's a beautiful landscape around Manchester, and that really inspires a lot of my work, so I want to create images that almost feel like paintings. And then this is the city. I'm always trying to get an interesting place in the city, so the buildings, the rooftops, the tunnels underneath, trying to use my photography as a way of exploring the world. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of show how all these different elements fit together and how I build them. So this was the first image that kind of that used this idea of many separate captures to make the final picture. So that's the final picture there. It's a wheat field in Essex in the south of England. And it was just, I've been trying these ideas out and thinking about these ideas of blending images for quite a long time while I was working in a photographic studio. And then this was the first time I got to really try them in the real world. So I stood in front of this view and thought, okay, I just need to shoot as much as possible. For every shoot I do, I create a library of images, and then I'll sit down at my computer and try and make sense of those images and build them into these kind of landscapes where I can control the light, I can control the shape, I can work on the colours. So if I go into this set of images here, you can see how all these separate pictures are going together. So I shoot the camera on manual, I found an exposure that does a reasonable job for the whole image. I move it around, collecting as much detail as possible. But things happen like this, a decent exposure down here. By the time you get to the sky, it's almost bright white, it's really burnt out. So by carefully using different exposures, I can make much darker images of that same view. So if we go further down here, I do the same thing again, but a much darker exposure. So suddenly I've got this lovely detail to the sky, and then I can bring that detail in and have much more kind of painted the image and have this beautiful level of detail that feels a bit like how you look at a view. So as you look at a view, your eyes adjust. If you look at something brighter or darker, your eyes kind of see the light differently. So I want to create images that are close to that experience. And it's not really a sort of mathematical way of working. I try and keep things quite loose. I try not to shoot on the tripod, but I can use different lenses. I can go closer to bits I want to make bigger, so I step closer to the barn so I can make that bigger in the competition if I need to. So that gives you an idea of all the separate images that go into the pictures. And they're almost like jigsaws put together. So if we go down here and open this image in Photoshop, we're going to be looking at a picture from Italy, and it's part of Italy called Tuscany, and it's really beautiful landscapes. So that's the final image. It's made out of about 150 separate images, and I really wanted it to feel like you almost stepped into it. I love images where you see right down to where you're standing, and I also really wanted to, as I build it, make shapes so that kind of your eyes are kind of guided around it. You feel like you're kind of taking on a journey around this landscape. And they're really detailed because they're made up of so many separate bits. You can zoom right in and see almost bricks on these very distant objects. But the reason I'm showing this one is because I saved it about 2 weeks before it's finished and kept all the layers. So in Photoshop you've got what's called the layer palette, and this is all the different bits of images, almost all the different pieces of the jigsaw. They're the images there that are coming together, and then this is called a layer mask, and that is how I control what's seen of those different images. And if I slowly click on the eyes to the left of the layer palette, you can see I'm slowly stripping that image back. The actual day I photographed it, the sky was really flat and blue, and there wasn't much character to it. So I dropped in a sky from a different time when the sun was lower, there was a bit more cloud around, so it had a little bit more shape to it, a little bit more drama than just a flat blue gradient. But then if I keep working my way down, you can see how all these different bits are fitting together. We slowly work our way down to just a wide angle image of these grapes here. And I use different lenses as well. With a wide angle lens, you can put people right in the middle of the scene. So if I shot wide angle here, that would make it feel like I stood next to there. But wide angle makes distant objects look really tiny. So if I shot the whole thing on just a wide angle, the Audi would have been minuscule within the shot. But by shooting on a much longer lens, I can put in a much bigger version and really sort of control the structure and shape of these landscapes. So it's all made in Photoshop, and so far I've shown pictures where I'm making kind of heightened versions of landscapes. But also I can use the same ideas and layers, layer masks, to create images totally from my imagination. So this is a place that doesn't exist, but it's all built out of elements of cities I've visited. So this is a final image. It's called Sealand, and it's based on this idea of there's a World War II gunning platform just off the Essex coast, which was abandoned, and it's just outside UK waters. And in the 70s, the family went and claimed it and called it the smallest country in the world. And it's got its own flag, its own passport, its own national anthem. And it doesn't look like this. It's just two columns out of the water and a platform on the top. But this was me trying to imagine what would happen if that became a successful city and grew. So that was kind of the starting point. And again, it's really detailed. So this is a crop of just the middle of it. You can see that it just keeps zooming in. And I've put loads of detail on into industrial works, power stations. I think there's even wind farms, wind generators. But this is the image around about halfway through. So it took about a month to do, and this is about 2 weeks before it's finished. And if I click on the layers here, I can strip it back. So this is the thing I built on top of, which was just a landscape I'd taken a couple of years before I started it, from these marshes. So all you could see was the sunset and the clouds. There were no buildings nearby and no trees, so I was able to really sort of just have this very pure landscape just at the horizon. And then the next stage was this quite interesting pier in the Netherlands. Which usually appeared in England, looked like they're from the kind of maybe 100, 120 years old, very Victorian, very Edwardian. But suddenly I saw a pier that looked quite modern, quite like it was almost from the 80s. So I photographed it from lots of angles, and then through very careful layer masking, I got rid of all the points where the pier was facing in. And I could slowly, by doing that, make this platform out of sea. So it's all one pier, and all these images are made out of elements of me that I can just walk to and see. A lot of them, there's no special access. When I was photographing this, there were just loads of other people on the beach as well. But it's all about using my imagination to see what I can create. And I knew I wanted buildings on it, I knew I wanted it to be a city, so for a while I drew this rough outline like that. And then I started visiting Manchester, Liverpool, and photographing buildings. And because I had a little print out of that, I was able to anticipate the angle I needed to be, and also where the sun was coming from. So it's really important with these images that the point of light's fairly consistent. So any building I shot, the light had to hit it from the right angle. And eventually I found these buildings and put them in there. So yeah, that's a little bit about how I create these kind of surreal scenes. That's final image again, so you can kind of get an idea of what happens when it's flat and when it all kind of comes together, and I can work on the light and the feel of that image. So here's another one that's a kind of creative landscape. This final image is made out of elements from bits of England, bits of the Peak District near Manchester, rock formations from North Wales and Snowdonia, a castle from Monmouthshire, and then the trees from near Chatsworth, and some of those rocks that are kind of exploding, just little pebbles on the path in front of me. So by being really clever, I can make them feel like they're as big as houses. But I really wanted the horse and rider to be a kind of important feature of the image. And I put myself in quite a lot of pictures, but this kind of demonstrates how I made the horse and rider. So take a lot of influence from photography, but also a lot from paintings and films I've seen. And this is a painting in Manchester Gallery that I've always loved of a horse and rider I've always looked at, and I kind of almost use that as an influence and a kind of thing to work on top of. So I needed to work out how to create that. There was no suit of armour. In Manchester Gallery there's this room full of silverware, these beautiful kind of objects, and little trinket boxes and just beautifully crafted things from the last kind of 500 years. And I photographed virtually everything in that room, just taking as many pictures as possible of all these beautiful objects. And then I slowly used all those little bits of precious objects to kind of create a suit of armour. And you can see there as I go through the layers, turn them off, that I'm slowly stripping the suit of armour back. And it took me about a day to make a suit of armour. And I'm in the suit of armour, but all I had to do to put myself in was photograph my face from the side, from slightly different angles, so I could put myself in there. But yeah, so it's all made out of stuff that, just from this room, but I'm just trying to use my imagination to rebuild these things in different ways. And then I've got a picture that shows shows how these images evolve and the work that goes into them to create the final picture. So this is a picture from my Secret Cities project, where I visit strange, forgotten spaces in modern cities. So this is from Edinburgh, make that a bit bigger. And it's up the top of St Giles Cathedral, and you can see the Royal Mile and Edinburgh Castle there, and then Arthur's Seat, the dormant volcano in the distance in the city. And I really like to try and put the camera in kind of interesting places, so I might put it in the water, I might put it up high. In this case, I wanted the camera off the side of the building, so these are the steps I was stood on as I was taking it. But the camera, I've got something you call a magic arm, where you can clamp it onto things. So I clamp it onto that bar up there, and I can lock the camera off and do long exposures that I need to do night photography. So that meant I don't need a tripod underneath me. I can have the camera like 2 foot off the side of the building and still kind of lean out and create these pictures. So that's the final image. By the way, if anyone's got any questions as we're going along, I use a D700, a Nikon one. It's a decent camera, but it's not like an extraordinary camera. But it's more the process and how they're built that allows me to create these images. It's more the idea that I'm using one image from that camera next to another image, next to another, and then I work with the colour. So it's more the process that allows me to kind of create the pictures that have this kind of feel. Yes? It's the idea that it'll be using the same idea as cameras, or the kind of automated panorama functions they have, but it's done much more by eye and I'll take a picture in the middle, I'll go to the left, I'll go right, I'll go above, try and remember this grid of images. So when I teach it to school kids back in England, I say we'll do a grid of 9 images to start with, and move left, up and down, and then we open those in Photoshop and start sitting them on top of each other. So it's the same idea as the kind of automated way that cameras get to do panoramas, but it's a bit more hands-on, it's a bit more using the software and taking control. Yes?
Has anyone looked at these without knowing how they were made and thought it was 3D model?
I think a few people wonder if any of it's, how much of it's computer generated and how much, but I've got things that almost look like 3D modeling, and to do that, I actually made card models and then matched them onto it, so, but all of it's pictures I've taken.
Yeah, because it's seamless, but it's very pretty, so
I
just imagine assuming that.
Yeah, well I think the thing that quite a few people said about it is it looks like the real world, but you can tell it's not quite the real world with the shapes of it. So it's almost kind of dreamlike because of that. So you think it's reality, but it's slightly wrong, slightly kind of skewed version of the real world. When I was creating this image, I did a screen grab about every 20 minutes, and it took about 2 days to build the whole image. So that entire 2 days of post-production to make this image is crammed into this 1 minute film. But just before I press play on that film, I just want to give a bit of an outline of what you're going to see. As I put these images together, and we'll make them out of lots of separate pictures, I don't do it all in one go. I tend to work in chunks. So in the case of this image, I worked on this middle area here, I worked on this right-hand area there, and I worked on the big city bit over that side, and then I put those three individual composites together as a kind of composites. And the reason I do that is, if you start in the middle of an image, slowly work out, especially if you shot on a wide-angle lens, you get the wide-angle distortion, and then you're putting another image onto that, and it gets even more amplified. And by the time you get right out to the outside, you get these images that are just out of control. So by doing it in chunks, you kind of keep things under control and stop it kind of sprawling into these things that are too big. But yeah, I'll hit play, and I'll try and roughly keep up with what's going on. So the first thing I'm doing is making the centre bit. This is a layer palette which we were looking at before, and this shows how all those different images interact with the layer masks. Once I've done that, I start working on this right-hand side of it, the bit that's almost behind me. Again, you've got the layer mask, and then the city starts evolving, different images put together. And then this stage, I'm putting those three separate bits together, and you get these, the image is quite strange, it kind of gets these weird edges and really odd shapes, so there's a lot of subtly changing the shape of it, cloning the sky, so when you've got these black bits, kind of clone the sky on top of it. This is all the kind of construction stage, so at this point I'm kind of using all these separate images to construct something. But then towards the end I start doing work on the light and the feel of the image and the kind of atmosphere. So I wanted it to be a kind of pearliness around the sun. So just coming up, you'll see how I do that. I make a selection around the moon and create this kind of pearly feel. And I inject a bit of warmth into the colours. So in Edinburgh there's, the bricks don't feel quite grey, they've kind of got a warmth to them. So I wanted to kind of inject that warmth in the image. So you can do something like make it very, very sepia tone using tools like hue and saturation to make it very red. And then you can fade that, so you can have that on fader. You go right back from 100%, something like that, to like 10%. So you've got the original colours, but with a kind of warmth. It's almost like, say you were doing watercolours and you put a wash over something, it's like you're putting something transparent over the top of it. Just changing the feel a little bit. Yeah, so that's hopefully gives you an idea of how they're built and how they come together. So I'm going to show some of my different landscapes. I try and use photography as a way of seeing the world. Maybe that's my own city where I live or places nearby, but also it's a great way of sort of travelling and seeing as much of the world as possible. But this is a place I visit all the time. It's a beautiful forest, Macclesfield Forest, and there's always different weather there. So I was trying to capture the kind of coldness of the mist, and I work on the colours, so I make those blues a little bit stronger. I just want to create pictures that you always feel the kind of dampness in your skin. This is an image that is made, a lot of the ones I've shown you so far are made out of quite wide angle images put together, but this was all shot on a very long lens. So that there, directly above me, would have been an image moving across all separate images with a very long lens, and that actual bit of the view would just have been a very small bit of the overall view, but by using a very long zoom lens I could take that little bit of detail and make it into this big wide landscape. And it's on the full res version you can see oil fields out at sea, wind farms, flocks of birds. So I just like creating images that you can really sort of step into. And I love trying to catch different effects of light. So this is in the Peak District, and very early in the morning, the sun's rising and hitting the snow and creates kind of low fog over the river. You have these beautiful kind of beams of light coming through the trees, but then it was hitting the water and you get beams coming up as well. So there's just this effect of light that I've never seen before. So I always like the challenge of trying to capture that and make it feel like you can almost step into that or almost feel the crunch of the snow. This is one that sort of combines the two ideas of showing the surreal landscapes, like the mountain and the sea land, with a kind of paint to the image, an image that looks, I guess, fits in kind of landscape galleries. But the whole thing, I drew a sketch of the shape of the wave I wanted it to be, so I drew the composition out, and then I went and got the elements to build it. So the waves from Whitby Bay, and I stood on the edge of the bay, and the waves were crashing in. I photographed about 60 shots of all these waves doing different things. Zooming in on tops of waves, zooming in on distant waves, and I'm slowly going to put all those 16 images together to create this wave formation in the foreground. Then bits of the sunset from the middle of Yorkshire inland, and the boat that I travelled around a lot to find. I went around Whitehall Welsh North Wales coast, and then eventually Southern Ireland near Cork. I found a boat that was just the right size, it felt kind of vulnerable, and like the sea would be buffeting it around. And then, yeah, I wanted this idea that you have choppy waters in the storm. Yes?
Did you take a picture of the boat in the water, or was it suspended out of the dock?
Yeah, on a dry dock, so I was up on the rafters, which is good because I can get beneath it. So that's really handy because if it had been in the water, I could only ever get the water level. But by being able to look up it, the camera kind of fits its position on the wave. So yeah, every boat I was shooting was in a similar place. Sometimes it'd be on my boat, so I'm trying to get below it. So again, with this sort of water and the print of the wave for a while, I've been like, okay, I need to figure out the boat that's going to fit out. Oh, let's do that.
On that image you just had of the cityscape,
Which one is that? That one? Yeah.
if you got your camera out on a pole, can you see what you're shooting?
Well, it's, yeah, I can just about look through it. But sometimes I don't need to. Like, and I just know that if I move it, I can kind of predict how wide angle it is. I can kind of get my head around what positions will cover that entire view. Sometimes there's maybe a lot of overlap. But I think with that, it was probably, I was on the steps there and the camera was around there, so I could kind of lean over a little bit and take pictures. And I had the camera like cable tied to the thing as well, and I was really careful because it's quite. I used to get really bad vertigo, but at least doing this kind of work helped me get over that. So I'll just go through a few more landscapes. The movies kind of feed into what I do, so I've always loved the Mad Max films, and it's in the outback of Australia, so all the industrial smell slowly turned into rust. It's really interesting to suddenly be in a place that looks like it could be from some of these really cool movies. So some of the new worlds were science fiction ones, I'm thinking about Star Wars films and other movies like that from my childhood. So that's Coney Island on the last day of summer, just as going tonight. This one's actually made just from one, this is the only image I've shown you so far that's made from just one photograph, but I shot raw, which means that as you open it in your computer, you can control the white balance, you can control how light or dark it is. So by shooting raw, I created like a mid version, that was how I shot it, but then I also created a darker version of the same image, and a lighter version, and in Photoshop, put them all on top of each other. And I was able to paint through some of the darker bits, to make it feel like you're indoors, and some of the light bits outside to make it feel like light's flooding through. And the whole wall was actually just a wall stood on its own, fully outside. So this sense that you're in a hall of maybe looking out was something that I created from kind of painting these different exposures together in Photoshop. This is some from New York, Grand Central Station. Feel like it's Thailand. With this, I shot right down, my feet would have been here. So I shoot the whole thing, my feet might be in it, and then I'll just step out of the way and get where I'm standing so that kind of, it's almost like you can step into these views. This is Manchester where I come from. And within this image, it goes from, I got up there at dusk on a really cold winter night and photographed up to about here, you've got images from dusk, and then it kind of hands over to some images from late in the evening where it's much darker, and some of these are when the sky had almost gone totally dark, so it's kind of drifting through this whole span of time. This is from Shanghai, it's a really busy street. And I don't have people in images often. As soon as you put a person in an image, your eyes go straight to them and it becomes a picture of a person and that person. So if there's people in them, sometimes it's the back of a person or the side of a person. But this, I just felt like having that total engagement and that total eye contact and connection kind of really, made it right to have people in it. And it almost like someone staring out warm culture back at me. It felt like that kind of look.
Oh, okay.
Then this is one it's a composite image, but instead of being created with a very wide lens or long lens, it's a macro lens. So I can sort of get very, very close. And one thing that I really like with photography is you can use different cameras to see the world in a more vivid way. So you can use different exposures at night to make things much brighter than your eyes will actually see. With this, I use a macro lens to pick out more detail than your eye can actually see. So you never, no matter how hard you look, you never quite see that definition and level of detail. So that's kind of what that is about, how photography can enhance how you see the world. this is one of New York, and on my website there's a version of it. You can zoom right in, and there's pool parties on roofs. There's a police incident outside that. There's McDonald's there. Helicopters taking off. All sorts of different things that you can kind of explore in the final image. And this one uses the same idea with lots of separate pictures, but all these vehicles drove in front of me over a 45-minute time. I was creating a wide-angle shot and then let vehicles kind of move past in front of me, and every time something new happened, photograph them, or if I'm a person still in a different position, photograph them. So all these vehicles were there over a 45-minute time, but I could use Photoshop to compress them into one flat image, so this whole span of time can be just squeezed into one image, which is what I've done there. And then there's one of the prints from upstairs, which is a place called Possum Valley in Australia, and I really wanted it almost like you can feel the twigs under your feet. There's beautiful red dirt there, so it's lovely to try and bring that out, and then reflect it in the colour of the boat as well. So it was a really serene place to be, and I wanted to capture that in a photograph. Has anyone got any questions or any images that they've seen in the show they want to talk about? Because this isn't going to be as long as the usual talk today.
You ever think of like huge, like just parked on giant
Sometimes. Yeah, this Manchester one that I was showing a second ago has been printed as a wallpaper, about maybe that size, maybe even slightly bigger. And because they got so much detail, as you can see by this. This is there's a tiny little, if you look at what I'm pointing out there, there's a tiny little bit of detail of the image there, which is a distant television aerial on something called Winter Hill. And this is that at full res, so you can see how much detail is there and how much definition. So it could, it could blow up, it could be as big as this screen, and you wouldn't see pixels, you would just see the detail of the image. So it's kind of taking as big as I want.
On the image of Grand Central Station, how many images did you take to build that composite?
Probably about 50, maybe more. I would have moved the camera around and captured all the top bit, but then kind of locked the camera off and pointed it in one place and let lots of people move around in front of me on the floor. So maybe point at one bit of the floor and take like 15 pictures, point at another bit, 15 pictures, and then look through them and try and get the moments that are most interesting. So I think there's a nice detail where there's a lady photographing 3 people here, and there's a guy kind of looking bored over here. I just kind of would have locked the camera off on one area, so maybe this bit of it here, and just let everything play out. And then you can't take tripods into these places. And I need to do long exposures, but luckily, you see these banisters here, they're all angled at the top there. So with my wallet, I could wedge that and then use the angles to lock the camera off, put all my weight on it, and do like 2 or 3 second exposures, knowing it wouldn't move. Then I'd put my wallet under it. Then if I wanted to do the ceiling, I'd move back on that banister and get the top. So there's a lot of kind of trying to think of quick tricks for kind of making the most of it, especially when you're doing travelling stuff. You kind of have to think on your feet. Like Kennedy Space Centre, there's a lot of getting the lens right up to the glass of the bus, but then if I can work on those images properly and get rid of any detail from the glass, it can look like I had like a full VIP tour, but actually I was just going through it as a tourist. So there's a lot of kind of quick tricks for making more of what you've got in front of you. Yeah.
So most, or all of your camera work is held without a tripod?
I try and do it handheld, but not always. I mean, sometimes just somewhere where there's not much light around, and using I always try and use available light. I don't bring my own flash gun, but can help it. Available light always has a lot more character. So I will use a tripod if I need to. If I need to do like half second exposure or 10-second exposure. But I do like the spontaneity of just moving around and just having it handheld and being able to kind of change my height, get low down. So I'd always rather do it handheld, but there are times when I have to use a tripod and make use of the fact that I can then do long exposures because it holds the camera perfectly still.
So for 2-second exposures you can hold it, and then for anything up around 15 or so you use a tripod?
No, you probably couldn't really hold it for 2 seconds.
Oh, you couldn't?
You could probably do like half a second, and if you lean against the wall you can maybe get a little bit longer. but anything, really you should be aiming with a standard lens of like 6/6 of a second or quicker, otherwise you will start seeing your aim, no matter how hard you try, it will look like a slight blur to it. And then if you use a really long lens, you're taking this small bit of the view, and effectively any movement you make will be amplified by that lens, so then you have to work like 500th of a second to get it still. But there's all sorts of tricks and ways of getting around that, making the most of what's in front of you.
What kind of printer would you use to print movies?
I use different printers. I've got companies I work with that do large format wallpapers. I've got the ones up there are using a process called a light jet process, which is actually it's actually photographic paper, and it's a laser projecting colours into that, and then it gets printed like you would a colour photograph, where it goes through the chemical process. But then I didn't used to use ink-based printers that much, but they've got really good. You get printers with like 12 different shadings, so it's very subtle, and with the right paper, it's really good. So it depends what I want, and it depends what the budget is on the job. My personal favourite are the lambda prints up there, because they just look closest to what I see on the screen, and that's the important thing. But I do work with printers, even those prints were done by a company in Orlando, and we did a lot. They sent tests to me in England, and then I did tweaks, making them more contrasty or more saturated, send files back. Did that a couple of times. So it's not just the printer you work with, it's kind of relationship you build with them, and knowing what their printer does. Like I know there's a printer I use to do a lot of print myself from a website. I know that I might have to bump the saturation up a tiny bit to get what I want. But I've worked with them so much, I can just take that. What company did those? I think it might be on the. You guys don't know the company that. Yeah.
Color reflections?
Okay, Colour Reflections. They were really good to deal with, and I think they were quite a big help to the festival, weren't they? So I recommend them.
How long and in what way do you like? How did you have those, and how long did it take?
Well, I'll talk about how my photography evolved. I was always into the visual arts, and when I did a general art design course for 2 years, and the second year I specialised in photography. I got into documentary photography, it was before digital was anything really worth doing, and I had tons of money. And it was all film-based, quite street photography with a fixed lens, and that was what I did at college. But then when I left college, I needed to work out to make money from it. So I started working in the studio, sweeping floors, making cups of tea, and eventually kind of got up to senior photographer. And they invested really early in really nice digital backs and really good versions of Photoshop. So while I was there, I was photographing not the most exciting of like luggage, things like that, catalogs. And to stop myself going crazy, I would, for each shot, I would kind of build 2 or 3 images and overlap them, and I'd start experimenting, and I'd try and learn the keyboard shortcuts, and then that image, and I was thinking, okay, I can take these kind of high-end digital skills, start using in the studio, and apply them to the real world. And this was the first image, the first time I stood in front of the landscape. All these ideas are kind of formed. And I walked around the local park quite a lot, and done just little 3 images next to each other. So that was on great days, and it was more like experiments. But then this was the first one where I was like, okay, this is it, I can try this idea out, and I got everything. And in fact, I made 3 visits to get there in exactly the right light and weather. I knew it was a really, really nice view. So this was the first one, and then since doing this, I've done many, many, many more. But it's evolved. It's grown into that idea of different chunks of images, and then also I've done more surreal ones, the sea land, things like that, shots that aren't just one place. So it's just slowly evolved, and a lot of that's none of it's really happened through any training. It's just more been through having an idea in my head and thinking, how can I do that, and then sitting down and slowly working through it. And in the case of a lot of these, it's just I might occasionally, like every 2 years, pick up something new in Photoshop, but mostly it's variations of stuff I did in this image, but just used in slightly different ways.
Andrew,
Yes.
can you show us the Empire State Building?
The one from the Empire State Building.
What's that?
The image from the Empire State Building.
Yeah, the image of the Empire State Building.
The one I took from that, the New York image.
Yeah. Oh, is that? Oh, okay. I thought you took one of the building itself.
No, I've just got the image from up the top of it, looking at New York. But I have got that. There's a bit on my website where you can explore. Let's see if this opens. Explore these really detailed images. So there's a whole gallery of them. If I click on that, you can. Hang on, I just made it full screen. You can use this to go right into. So this is like that police incident of saying which is tucked away there, and then sometimes I find it, sometimes I don't. But yeah, there's some kind of pool party going on the roof there, and then you can go right into Statue of Liberty in the distance. And yeah, so I've just kind of packed them full of so much detail, and there's a lot more in here where you can kind of explore them yourself. So it's an image I took in St. Peter's Basilica from inside the dome, and it's, you go here, you've got, the scale is incredible, so you've got individual people there, and then it's slowly pull back, and that's just the tiniest bit. It's almost, I wanted it to almost look like a rock kind of decorative panel, which is the final image on that. In some of them I am, and some of them I use a zoom lens just so I get it very detailed, but then some of them I use a very wide angle. Just depends, I use different lenses and sometimes different lenses. Well, it zooms into 35mm, but then I might put a longer lens on it to capture those distant people. I should use a.
And you have to shrink that down.
Or scale everything else up a bit, or meet in the middle of the wide angle and the long one. So it's yeah, it's just kind of combining. I try never to lose any detail from any shot. I try never to shrink anything, or even though sometimes I'll be working on an image like this, it would be like 5 gig when it's open in Photoshop, and then you transforming everything. Take like that to do it, go and make a cup of tea and come back and half done it or something like that, because it's got so many pixels to think about. But yeah, that's why it's really well, this isn't my main one. Well, this is one of the time. I've got an iMac in the studio. I don't know how much RAM's in it, but I did put quite a bit in when I bought it, so it works quite quick.
How do you figure out like how big the human element to participate in structuralism?
Well, I can say a shot like the Grand Central Station. I just let it all play out, and then I can pick what I want from those images. So it might be that there's a good person in one, I put them there, and then I use another person from one image. So I just kind of let things happen and try. You know, if there's an image when they're half walking outside the frame, I probably can't use that. It's usually when they're actually going in the middle of the frame that I can use it. But I might use bits from 30 different images, all those people in bits I want. So I just let the world happen and capture it as much as possible, and then just see what I've got and pick the best bits to kind of put in the image. But I've been photographing lots of the area since I've been here, so there's some cards around. I'm going to be putting those images on my Facebook and on my website and sharing them with the festival. So you'll be able to see pictures of NASA, been over to the beach today, and there's got some nice images out there. So there's going to be lots of images of this area going online as I get a chance to work on them. So I think there should be cards over there. And I'm going to be around until 5. I think it'll close at 5. But if you've got any questions, come and have a word and know more about different shots.